parents gave my sister $100,000 for a house and gave me nothing but the failure, so I stopped calling them. 2 years later, my sister drove past my property and called Dad screaming, "You need." Growing up as the second daughter in the Martinez family meant existing in permanent shadow. My older sister, Veronica, got the sunshine while I learned to navigate by whatever dim light filtered through. Mom and Dad never bothered hiding their preferences. Veronica walked at 9 months. I stumbled around until 14 months, which apparently sealed my fate as the disappointing child before I could even form sentences. Every family has dynamics, but ours felt carved in stone. Veronica made honor roll throughout elementary school. I brought home mostly B's with the occasional A-, which prompted Dad to ask what was wrong with me at every parent-teacher conference. She played varsity volleyball, and Dad never missed a game, filming every serve and spike. I joined the art club, and Mom forgot to pick me up so many times that Mrs. Chen, our advisor, started driving me home herself. The pattern repeated through every milestone. Veronica got a car for her 16th birthday. I used Honda Civic that Dad spent 3 weekends detailing until it gleamed. When my 16th rolled around, they took me to dinner at Applebee's and gave me a gift card for $50. Mom said I should be grateful they remembered it all, given how busy they were with Veronica's college applications. College became another chasm between us. Veronica got into UCLA with a partial academic scholarship. My parents covered the rest, roughly $30,000 a year, without blinking. They threw her a graduation party before she even left, inviting everyone from our church and Dad's office. I watched from the kitchen, refilling chip bowls, while relatives I barely knew congratulated my parents on raising such an accomplished daughter. When my turn came 2 years later, I gotten accepted to a state school 3 hours away. The tuition was half what Veronica's cost. I sat my parents down during dinner, acceptance letter in hand, excited despite years of training myself not to expect much. Dad barely looked up from his pot roast. "We're not paying for that," he said, cutting into his meat with surgical precision. The room tilted slightly. "What do you mean? You paid for Veronica." Mom jumped in, her voice taking on that syrupy, reasonable tone she used when delivering bad news. Veronica earned her spot at a prestigious university. "You're going to a state school. That's something people do when they're not serious about education." "It's still college," I managed, hearing my voice crack like I was 13 again. Dad finally looked at me, and I wish he hadn't. His expression held nothing but disappointment. Familiar as my own reflection. Veronica is going places. She's got potential. You've never applied yourself to anything. We're not throwing money away on someone who's just going to waste it. The words landed like physical blows. "You think I'm going to waste it? We think you need to figure out your life on your own," Mom said, already clearing plates like the conversation was over. "Veronica worked hard. You coast. There's a difference. I took out student loans. All of them. Every single dollar of that education got financed at 6.8% interest, which I'm still paying off today. I worked 2 jobs through college, one at the campus library and another waiting tables at a diner that smelled permanently of burnt coffee and broken dreams. My grades suffer because exhaustion makes terrible study partner, but I graduated. Barely anyone from my family came to the ceremony. Veronica was too busy with her new marketing job in San Francisco, and my parents said the drive was too long for just a state school graduation. What they didn't know was that I'd stopped expecting them to show up long before graduation day. The real breaking point had come during my sophomore year when I'd gotten pneumonia from working double shifts in winter without a proper coat. I couldn't afford to miss work, so I kept going until I collapsed during my library shift. My roommate Jennifer found me on the floor between the stacks, fever so high I was hallucinating about the Dewey Decimal System coming to life. She drove me to urgent care, paid a copay I didn't have, and let me stay with her family over Thanksgiving break so I could recover. I called my parents from her mother's guest room, voice barely above a whisper, thinking maybe serious illness would trigger some parental instinct. Dad answered on the 4th ring. "What is it? We're about to sit down for dinner. I've been in urgent care. I have pneumonia. The doctor says I need to rest for at least a week, but I'll lose both jobs if I don't work." Silence stretched across the line then. Well, that's what happens when you overextend yourself. You need to learn better time management. No offer to help with medical bills. No suggestion that they could send money so I could take a week off work. Just criticism delivered in that flat tone that suggested my crisis was boring him. Mom got on the phone, her voice syrupy with false concern. "Are you taking your vitamins?" "I told you to take vitamins. This wouldn't have happened if you'd listened to me." I hung up while she was still talking. Jennifer's mom, Mrs. Patricia Chen, yes, the same woman who later became my financial advisor. Funny how life works. Knocked on my door 10 minutes later with hot soup and a check for $500. "My daughter tells me you're working yourself sick," she said, settling into the chair beside my bed. "This isn't a loan. Consider it an investment in your future. Take the week off. Heal. Your jobs will still be there, and if they're not, better jobs will come." I cried so hard I almost threw up the soup. That was the moment I understood that family wasn't about blood. It was about who showed up when you needed them. The pattern of my parents' neglect had deeper roots than I'd admitted to myself for years. I started seeing a counselor at the campus health center during my junior year, a kind woman named Dr. Rebecca Walsh who specialized in family trauma. She asked me to map out my childhood, identifying moments when I'd felt truly seen by my parents. The exercise took 15 minutes. I came up with 3 moments total when I was 7 and won second place in a school art contest. Though Dad spent most of the ceremony talking to Veronica's volleyball coach when I was 12 and cooked dinner for the family because Mom was sick, though she critiqued my pasta sauce the entire meal. And when I was 15 and scored well enough on the PSAT to qualify for a scholarship program, though Dad said the test didn't really matter anyway. 3 moments in 18 years where they'd acknowledge my existence with something other than disappointment. "What do you notice about these memories?" Dr. Walsh asked gently. "That even the good ones have qualifiers. Even when I did something right, it wasn't quite right enough." She nodded slowly. "And how does that make you feel about your upcoming graduation?" Like I'm already bracing for them not to care. Dr. Walsh helped me craft what she called protective expectations. Instead of hoping my family would show up and feeling devastated when they didn't, I planned for their absence. I invited Jennifer and her family. I invited Mrs. Chen. I invited my favorite professor, Dr. Martin, who had mentored me through my senior thesis. I built my own cheering section from people who'd actually invested in my success. When graduation day came and my parents didn't show, I felt the ache of it. You can't completely armor yourself against that kind of rejection, but I didn't fall apart. Jennifer's whole family wore shirts with my name on them. Mrs. Chen brought flowers. Dr. Martin took me out for dinner afterward and told me she'd written me a recommendation letter for any job I wanted to apply for. "You're going to do remarkable things," she said over dessert. "Not because of your family, but despite them." That kind of resilience is rare. I wanted to believe her, but the job market had other ideas. After college, I bounced between jobs. Graphic design at a small firm that folded after 8 months. Administrative work at a dentist's office where the dentist's wife decided she wanted my position. Freelance work that paid sporadically and kept me refreshing my bank account with increasing anxiety. I lived in a studio apartment that had mysterious stains on the ceiling and neighbors who screamed at each other in 3 different languages. The freelancers taught me more than any formal education ever could, though not the lessons anyone plans for. I learned to negotiate rates without flinching when clients lowballed me. I learned to spot red flags in project descriptions, words like exposure and portfolio piece that really meant we won't pay you. I learned to invoice immediately and follow up relentlessly because creative work was the first thing clients decided they could skip paying for when budgets tightened. But mostly I learned that I was capable of surviving things that should have broken me. There was the month my laptop died and I couldn't afford repairs, so I did all my work on my phone designing logos with my thumbs while my eyes watered from the strain. There was the week I got food poisoning and missed 3 deadlines, losing 2 regular clients who didn't care about explanations. There was the entire winter when my studio apartment's heating broke and my landlord took 6 weeks to fix it. So I worked bundled in every piece of clothing I owned, fingers barely able to operate my mouse. Through all of it, my family's commentary provided a bitter soundtrack. At the rare family gatherings I still attended, Dad would ask about my little hobby projects while Veronica talked about her corporate advancement. Mom would suggest I look into getting a real job with benefits, as if I hadn't applied to hundreds of positions, only to lose them to candidates with family connections or the financial cushion to take unpaid internships. The comparison felt calculated, surgical in its precision. Veronica would mention her Christmas bonus, and Dad would beam with pride. I'd mention landing a 3-month contract, and Mom would ask when I planned to get serious about my career. The goalpost shifted constantly, always staying just beyond my reach. What they never acknowledged was that Veronica's success had been bankrolled from the start. Her UCLA degree opened doors that my state school credentials couldn't. Her debt-free graduation meant she could take an unpaid internship at a prestigious firm while I was scrambling to make loan payments. Her resume showed stability because she could afford to be choosy about positions, while mine showed job hopping because I took whatever paid the bills. We weren't running the same race. She'd started at the 50-yard line while I was still trying to find the track. But something shifted in me during those grinding freelance years. Maybe it was hitting rock bottom so many times that I got familiar with the view. Maybe it was realizing that my parents' approval wasn't coming no matter what I achieved. Maybe it was just exhaustion finally crystallizing into anger. I stopped apologizing for my circumstances, stopped downplaying my achievements to make others comfortable. When clients tried to negotiate my rates down, I held firm or walked away. When family members made snide comments, I met them with silence instead of self-deprecating jokes. When people asked what I did for work, I said, I'm a designer without the qualifier of just freelance. The confidence was part performance, part fake it until you make it, part genuine growth. But it worked. Better clients started finding me. Projects got larger and paid more. I built a reputation for reliability and quality work that led to referrals and repeat business. Then came the family dinner that detonated whatever remained of our relationship. Every family dinner became an exercise in humiliation. Veronica would talk about her career trajectory, her 401k, her boyfriend Marcus, who worked in tech and had serious future potential. My parents hung on every word, asking follow-up questions and bragging to their friends. When conversation turned to me, if it turned to me, Dad would ask if I'd found real work yet, and Mom would suggest maybe I should look into going back to school for something more practical. The final straw came on a Tuesday evening. I'd driven 4 hours to have dinner with them, something I did monthly despite every instinct screaming to stop. Veronica video called halfway through the meal, face glowing with news. She and Marcus were buying a house. We found the perfect place in Marin County. She gushed through the phone screen. 3 bedrooms, gorgeous kitchen near the good schools for when we have kids. But we're just slightly short on the down payment. I watched my father's space transform into something tender, an expression I'd spent 26 years trying to earn. How much do you need, sweetheart? 100,000 would make it comfortable. We could swing it without, but it would stretch us thin. Mom and Dad exchanged one of their silent conversations, the kind where entire decisions happen in the space between eye contact. Dad nodded. Consider it done, he said. Well, wire it tomorrow. My fork clattered against my plate. You're giving her $100,000. We're investing in her future. Mom corrected like word choice changed the mathematics of favoritism. Something in me snapped, or maybe finally broke free. I couldn't get $30,000 for education, but she gets a $100,000 for a house. Dad's expression hardened. Veronica has proven herself. She's responsible. She's made something of her life, and I haven't. The question came out smaller than I intended. Look at yourself, Dad said, and his tone carried such contempt that I physically recoiled. You're 26 years old, working freelance jobs, living in that terrible apartment. You've accomplished nothing. Veronica is settling down, building equity, making smart choices. You're the failure of this family, and we're not going to fund failure anymore. The silence that followed could have swallowed planets. Mom didn't contradict him. Veronica's face on the phone screen showed discomfort, but no disagreement. Nobody rushed to my defense or softened the blow. I stood up, legs somehow steady, despite feeling like my entire foundation had crumbled. Okay, sit down. We're not done with dinner, Mom said. Yeah, we are. I walked out of that house and didn't look back, even when Mom called after me that I was being dramatic. The drive home blurred past in tears and rage and something else, something harder. Determination, maybe, or just the final death of hope. I stopped calling, stopped texting, stopped showing up to family dinners and holiday gatherings. My phone would light up occasionally with messages from Mom asking if I was still sulking, or Dad demanding I grow up and stop punishing everyone with my attitude. Veronica sent a few half-hearted texts about family being important and forgiveness being strength. I deleted them all. The first few months of no contact felt like withdrawal from a drug I'd never wanted to be addicted to. My finger would hover over Mom's contact every Sunday evening. Muscle memory from years of obligatory check-in calls. Holidays loomed like emotional landmines. Thanksgiving arrived, and I spent it alone in my apartment eating takeout Thai food and watching movies, feeling simultaneously liberated and devastated. Christmas was worse. I woke up to 17 missed calls and a voicemail from Mom, her voice sliding from sweet to accusatory as the message progressed. I don't understand why you're doing this to us. We're your family. This is abuse. What you're doing? Your father has been so stressed he's had to increase his blood pressure medication. Veronica cries about you constantly. When are you going to stop being selfish and come home? The manipulation was so blatant, I almost laughed. Almost. Instead, I saved the voicemail as evidence of their tactics and blocked her number. Then I drove to Mrs. Chen's house, where she'd invited me for dinner weeks earlier, anticipating that I'd need somewhere to go. Her family welcomed me, like I'd always belonged there. Jennifer's younger brother taught me how to play the new video game he'd gotten. Her grandmother showed me photos from Taiwan and told stories about immigrating to America with nothing but determination. Mrs. Chen's husband, David, asked about my freelance work with genuine interest, then connected me with a friend who needed design services. This is what family should feel like, I told Jennifer later, helping with dishes while the rest of the family played board games in the living room. This is what family does feel like, she corrected. Your family is just broken. That's on them, not you. The clarity of that statement, that their dysfunction was their responsibility, not my failure, helped something settle in my chest. I'd spent so long trying to fix whatever was wrong with me that I'd never questioned whether the problem was them all along. But cutting contact didn't mean I stopped thinking about them. Every achievement came with a ghost version of my father's disappointment. Every milestone arrived preloaded with my mother's criticism. I'd land a great client and immediately think, Dad would say, this is still just freelance. I'd save a chunk of money and hear Mom's voice asking why I wasn't saving more. Dr. Walsh, who I'd started seeing again after the family dinner explosion, called them intrusive thoughts. Your parents' voices have become your internal monologue, she explained during one session. Part of healing is separating your actual thoughts from their implanted criticisms. We worked on it through cognitive behavioral therapy, identifying when I was catastrophizing or predicting failure based on their old scripts. She had me write down every negative thought, then source it. Was this actually what I believed, or was I channeling my father? Did I genuinely think I was failing, or was I repeating my mother's assessments? The exercise revealed how much mental real estate they still occupied. Even in their absence, they colonized my internal landscape. So, I started renovating that at 2. For every critical thought, I forced myself to list 3 objective facts. You're going to fail became, I've completed 15 projects successfully this year. Clients have given positive reviews, and my income has increased 40%. You're not good enough became 3 different clients have referred me to others. My portfolio has work I'm genuinely proud of, and I'm supporting myself entirely. Slowly, painfully, I began evicting them from my head. Instead, I worked. God, did I work? The spike became fuel, better than coffee, more sustaining than sleep. I picked up every freelance gig I could find, building a portfolio while my eyes burned from screen time and my back ached from hunching over my laptop. I took online courses in UX design, motion graphics, brand development. Every skill I could monetize, I learned. 6 months after I walked out of their house, a mid-sized tech company hired me full-time as a senior designer. The salary made me blink 3 times at the offer letter. I took it immediately, then found a financial advisor through my new company's benefits program. I need to invest aggressively, I told her. A woman named Patricia who wore efficient pantsuits and had kind eyes. I have no safety net, no family money. Everything I build has to come from me. Patricia didn't ask questions about family. Instead, she asked about goals, risk tolerance, timeline. We built a plan. I maxed out my 401k contributions, opened a Roth IRA, started a brokerage account, and learned the difference between index funds and individual stocks. Every paycheck got divided with military precision. Living expenses, loan payments, investments. I moved into a better apartment, one where the ceiling had no stains, and the neighbors nodded politely in hallways. Nothing fancy, but mine in a way that studio never was. I bought furniture that didn't come from Facebook Marketplace, learned to cook something besides ramen and scrambled eggs, built a life that didn't include waiting for my parents to notice me. The new apartment became my laboratory for figuring out who I was without their influence. I painted the walls colors I liked, deep teal in the bedroom, warm terracotta in the living room, without worrying if they'd approve. I hung my own artwork, pieces that hadn't been good enough to show my family, but that I'd always loved. I bought plants and managed to keep most of them alive, which felt like a bigger achievement than it probably was. I also started saying yes to things that scared me. Jennifer invited me to a rock climbing gym, and instead of declining because I'd never been athletic enough to earn Dad's attention, I went. Turned out I was decent at it, and the problem-solving aspect appealed to the same part of my brain that loved design. I joined a weekly climbing group, made friends who knew nothing about my family history. One of those friends, a software engineer named Marcus, different Marcus, the universe has a sense of humor, mentioned his company was hiring designers. I'd been hesitant about applying to tech companies, assuming they only wanted people with computer science degrees or prestigious design school credentials, but Marcus convinced me to apply anyway. The best designer on our team dropped out of community college, he said while we were belaying each other. Companies care about your portfolio, not your pedigree. Well, the good companies do. I spent 2 weeks updating my portfolio, selecting my strongest work, and writing case studies that explained my design decisions. The application process was grueling. 4 interviews, a design challenge, a presentation to their creative team. But when the offer came through, the salary number made me read the email 3 times to confirm I wasn't hallucinating. It was more than double what I'd been averaging from freelance work, with benefits and equity and a team that actually seemed to value design as a core competency rather than a decorative afterthought. I accepted immediately, then sat in my apartment, staring at the offer letter until Jennifer came over and insisted we celebrate. We went to a nice restaurant, the kind I'd always walked past, assuming it wasn't for people like me, and ordered champagne. "To you," Jennifer said, raising her glass, "for being the most determined person I've ever met." "To being too stubborn to fail," I countered. "No," she said firmly, "to being smart and talented and refusing to let anyone convince you otherwise." I cried into my champagne, which probably wasn't proper etiquette, but the release felt necessary. This job was proof that I'd been right all along. My parents were wrong. Veronica's success wasn't inevitable superiority. It was advantage, and I'd managed to claw my way to similar success without any of that advantage. The vindication tasted better than the expensive champagne. Starting at the tech company felt like entering a different world. Everyone had monitors with proper color calibration. The coffee was good. People actually respected deadlines and didn't expect free revisions. My manager, a woman named Sharon, who'd been in tech design for 20 years, treated my opinions like they mattered. "You've got good instincts," she told me after my first month. "Rough around the edges in terms of working with developers, but that's just communication style. Your actual design thinking is solid." I soaked up everything I could learn: how to present to executives, how to run user research sessions, how to advocate for design decisions without making engineers defensive, how to navigate company politics without compromising my values. Sharon mentored me through all of it, introducing me to other senior designers and pushing me towards stretch projects. The imposter syndrome was relentless at first. I'd sit in meetings with people who had master's degrees from Carnegie Mellon or Stanford, who'd worked at Google or Apple, and feel like a fraud. But slowly, I realized my perspective was valuable precisely because it was different. I'd scraped together success from nothing, which meant I understood constraints in ways that privileged designers didn't. When we were designing a budget tracking feature, I pushed back against the team's assumption that everyone had savings accounts and investment portfolios. Not everyone has financial cushions, I said during a design review. Some people are tracking money down to the dollar because they're choosing between groceries and rent. The room got quiet, then Sharon nodded. That's a perspective we need more of. How do we design for that reality? That feature ended up being one of the most used parts of the app, particularly among younger users and people managing tight budgets. The company newsletter highlighted it as an example of inclusive design. My name was mentioned specifically. I didn't send the article to my parents, didn't screenshot the praise and forward it to Veronica, didn't even post about it on social media where they might see it. The achievement was mine, and I didn't need their validation to make it real. But I'd be lying if I said part of me didn't imagine Dad reading about it somehow, realizing he'd been wrong about me. That fantasy played on repeat sometimes. Him calling to apologize, Mom crying about how she'd misjudged me, Veronica admitting she'd always known they were treating me unfairly. Dr. Walsh and I worked on letting go of that fantasy too. They may never acknowledge what they did wrong, she said. Your healing can't depend on them finally seeing clearly. But what if they do? I asked. Then you get to decide if their apology is genuine and if you want to accept it. But hoping for it keeps you tethered to their approval. Real freedom comes from not needing it anymore. Not needing their approval. The concept felt as impossible as flying, but I started working toward it anyway. My career accelerated. The tech company promoted me to lead designer after a year. I switched companies 18 months after that for a senior position at a startup that offered equity. The startup got acquired 14 months later, and suddenly my stock options transformed into actual money, the kind with multiple zeros that made my hands shake when I checked my bank account. But I didn't blow it. Patricia and I had planned for windfalls. The money got invested, diversified, protected. I kept living in my decent apartment and driving my 7-year-old Toyota. The only indulgence I allowed myself was starting to look at land. I'd always loved the idea of space, of owning enough earth that nobody could peer over your fence and judge your worth. I spent weekends driving through areas north of the city, watching for sale signs. Most properties were too expensive or too small. Then I found it. 40 acres in Sonoma County, rolling hills with valley oak trees, and a seasonal creek running through the eastern portion. The land had sat on the market for 8 months because it needed well and septic work, which scared off most buyers. The property had an old farmhouse that needed complete renovation and several outbuildings in various states of decay. I didn't see problems. I saw potential. The sellers were an elderly couple moving to Arizona to be near their grandchildren. They'd loved the land but couldn't maintain it anymore. We sat at their kitchen table drinking instant coffee while I made my offer. They accepted, tears in the wife's eyes as she talked about how glad she was the property would go to someone who appreciated it. I closed on the land with cash from my investments, then took out a construction loan for renovations. But I didn't hire everything out. Years of watching DIY videos and spite-driven determination meant I could do more than most people assumed. I hired contractors for the structural work, the well drilling, the septic system. Everything else I researched and learned. I spent every weekend out there tearing out rotted wood and learning to tile. I refinished the original hardwood floors myself on hands and knees with a rented sander, painted every wall, replaced light fixtures and cabinet hardware. The farmhouse transformed slowly, room by room, into something beautiful. But the house was just the beginning. I wanted the land to work for me. I researched agricultural options and discovered that Sonoma County had perfect conditions for lavender farming. The market for lavender products, essential oils, dried flowers, culinary lavender, kept growing. Better yet, lavender required relatively low maintenance once established and could generate solid income. I planted my first 5 acres of lavender, spending weeks creating irrigation lines and learning about soil pH. I bought bees to help with pollination and discovered I loved keeping them. I added a small herd of goats because they were excellent for land management and I'd always wanted animals. I built a processing barn where I could dry lavender and extract oils. I started an online store and got licensed to sell at farmers markets. The learning curve for farming was steep enough to qualify as a cliff. Everything I thought I understood about hard work got redefined during that first year. I spent weekends reading agricultural extension guides and watching YouTube videos about lavender cultivation at 2 a.m. when I couldn't sleep. I joined online forums where experienced farmers answered my endless questions, usually with more patience than I deserved. The bees terrified me initially. I'd signed up for a beginning beekeeping course at the local extension office, where a weathered farmer named Tom taught 15 of us how to maintain hives without getting stung into anaphylaxis. He had this zen-like calm around the bees that I couldn't imagine replicating. "They'll sense your fear," he said. During our first practical session, suiting me up in a borrowed suit, "Stay calm, move deliberately, and respect what they're doing." My hands shook so badly I could barely hold the smoker, but Tom stayed beside me, talking through every step until I'd successfully checked my first frame for eggs and honey. The bees crawled over my gloved hands, and instead of panic, I felt something like wonder. "You're a natural," Tom said, and I nearly cried from the simple kindness of someone seeing potential in me. I bought 3 hives, which Tom helped me install on the property. I named them completely ridiculous names, Beyonce, Dolly, and Cher, because if I was going to do this, I was going to enjoy it. The goats got similarly absurd names, Rambert Downey Jr., Goatsart, and Billy Joel. My property started feeling less like an investment and more like a home. The physical labor was brutal but satisfying in ways my tech job never achieved. I'd spend mornings on the computer doing design work, then afternoons in the fields, my hands in soil, and my mind blissfully quiet. The goats would follow me around like demanding toddlers, head-butting my legs when they wanted attention. The bees hummed their constant song. The lavender grew in neat purple rows that smelled like every good thing I could imagine. During harvest season that first year, I hired 2 local high school students, Emma and Tyler, to help pick and bundle lavender. I paid them well above minimum wage and threw in fresh goat cheese and honey as bonuses. They worked hard, and I loved watching them discover that farm work could be rewarding when you were treated fairly. Emma mentioned during a lunch break that she was trying to save for college, but her parents couldn't help with costs. The echo of my own story was so loud I almost flinched. "What do you want to study?" I asked. "Environmental science, but the state schools are expensive, and I don't know if I can save enough while also helping my family." I thought about it for exactly 3 seconds. "I'll hire you part-time year-round if you want. 15 hours a week, flexible around your school schedule. The work varies by season. Planting, maintenance, harvest, processing. You can save specifically for college." Her face transformed. "Seriously?" "Seriously. You're a good worker, and I need consistent help anyway. Tyler, same offer if you're interested." They both accepted. I taught them everything Tom had taught me about land management, bee care, and crop cultivation. I watched them develop confidence and skills that no classroom could provide. When Emma got her acceptance letter to UC Davis the following spring, I gave her a bonus and told her I'd keep her position open for summer work. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, envelope still clutched in her hand. "Because someone did it for me once," I said, thinking of Mrs. Chen and a $500 check when I had pneumonia. "And because you deserve support." The farm became more than just a business or a property. It became proof that you could build something generous and sustainable, that success didn't require stepping on others or hoarding opportunities. Every decision I made, I asked myself, is this what my parents would do, or is this who I actually want to be? I chose different every time. The second year, revenue from the lavender covered my property taxes and insurance. The third year, it covered those plus equipment costs. I wasn't getting rich, but the farm sustained itself while my portfolio kept growing from my tech job. I could do most of the tech work remotely, which meant living on the property full-time and only driving into the city 2 days a week. I built a life that looked nothing like what my parents valued, and everything like freedom. During those 2 years of silence, my family tried reaching out sporadically. Mom would text on holidays asking if I planned to stop by. Dad sent an email once asking if I'd gotten over my tantrum. Veronica called every few months, voice tight with obligation, asking how I was doing, but never really listening to the answers I didn't give. I blocked their numbers. Eventually, I changed my phone settings so their messages went to a folder I never checked. On social media, I kept them all blocked. They knew nothing about my life, my success, my property, and I preferred it that way. Then came last Tuesday. I was in the processing barn bundling dried lavender for an online order when my phone rang from an unknown number. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Hello?" Heavy breathing came through the line. Then Dad's voice, shaking with something I'd never heard before, uncertainty. Maybe we need to talk. No, we really don't. My voice came out flat. Years of therapy helping me maintain boundaries without emotion. Your sister drove past your property. That stopped me. What? She was in Sonoma for a wine tasting with Marcus, took a wrong turn, and ended up on some rural road. She says she saw your truck in a driveway, a big property with lavender fields and a renovated farmhouse. My stomach tightened, but I kept my voice steady. And? Is it true? Do you own that land? Why would that matter to you? Dad's breathing got heavier. Veronica looked up the property records. 40 acres. House, barn. She says it must be worth close to $2 million. 2.3, I corrected before I could stop myself. I had it appraised last month. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought he'd hung up. Then how? Hard work, smart investing. Everything you said I wasn't capable of. We had no idea you were doing so well. You could have told us. The laugh that came out of me held no humor. Why would I tell you anything? You called me a failure and funded my sister's life while leaving me to drown in student loans. We thought you needed tough love. We thought if we didn't enable you, you'd find motivation. Tough love, I repeated, tasting the words like poison. You gave Veronica $100,000 while telling me I'd accomplished nothing. That's not tough love. That's just cruelty. Mom's voice came through in the background, apparently on speakerphone. We want to see the property. We want to be involved in your life again. No, you can't shut us out forever, Dad said. And now I heard the edge in his voice, the familiar demand for compliance. We're your parents. You stopped being my parents when you told me I was the family failure. You made your choice. I'm just living with it. Your sister is very upset, Mom chimed in. She's been crying all evening. She feels terrible about the house money now that she knows your situation. My situation? The bundle of lavender in my hand crushed under my grip, releasing its scent in a purple cloud. My situation is that I built a life without you, without your money, without your approval, without your presence. I don't need you now. We could help you expand the farm, Dad tried, and I could hear him scrambling, recalculating. We have connections. We could invest. I don't want your investment. I don't want anything from you. Veronica's voice came through. She must have been there too. I never meant to hurt you. I didn't know they were treating you so differently. That almost broke me because it was such an obvious lie. She'd been there. She'd watched them dismiss me at every turn, had accepted their money while knowing I got nothing. But I'd spent 2 years building armor. You knew exactly what you were doing. You all did. You bet on the wrong daughter. And now you're trying to hedge. That's not fair, Mom said, voice rising to that pitch she used when losing control of a narrative. Neither is giving one daughter everything while telling the other she's worthless, but here we are. So what? You're just never going to speak to us again? Dad demanded. After everything we did for you growing up? You mean feeding and housing me? That's called basic parenting, not a debt I owe. I could hear arguing on their end, muffled voices talking over each other. Finally, Dad came back on, his voice trying for warmth and landing somewhere near desperation. Let's have dinner. Just one dinner. Come to the house. We'll talk this through like adults. I am being an adult, I said. Adults have boundaries. Adults walk away from people who damage them. Adults build lives that don't include their abusers. Abusers? Mom's shriek could probably be heard without the phone. We never abused you. You're right, I said evenly. You just systematically destroyed my self-worth while financing my sister's dreams. Totally different. I hung up before they could respond, then immediately blocked the unknown number. My hands shook slightly as I set the phone down, adrenaline flooding my system. But underneath the shaking was something solid. Certainty, maybe, or just the knowledge that I'd finally said everything I needed to say. They tried other ways to reach me. An email from Dad's work account that went straight to spam. A letter mailed to my property that I returned unopened. Veronica showed up at my gate one Saturday morning, but I'd installed the camera system and simply didn't open it. She stood there for 20 minutes, occasionally calling out my name before finally leaving. The hardest part was when they tried using other relatives. Aunt Carol called saying, Mom was heartbroken and couldn't I just forgive them? Cousin Derek sent a Facebook message that somehow got through, talking about how family was everything and grudges were poison. I blocked them all. Anyone who took my parents' side without knowing the full story wasn't someone I needed in my life. My therapist, Dr. Singh, had been preparing me for this moment since I started seeing her 18 months ago. They'll try to reassert control when they realize you don't need them, she'd said during one session. That's when your boundaries will be tested most severely. She was right, but the boundaries held. I built them from the same materials as my new life: determination, self-respect, and the absolute certainty that I deserved better than what they'd offered. The lavender farm kept growing. I added another 10 acres of plants, installed a proper irrigation system, hired 2 part-time workers during harvest season. I started doing agritourism, hosting small groups for farm tours and lavender picking experiences. The income grew steadily, enough that I started considering leaving the tech job entirely and farming full-time. My social life improved, too. I'd met people through the farmers market, other vendors who became genuine friends. I started dating someone I met at a sustainable agriculture workshop, a man named Chris, who raised heritage breed chickens and made terrible jokes about pecking orders. Nothing serious yet, but something warm and uncomplicated, something that didn't require proving my worth every conversation. 6 months after that phone call, a package arrived at my property. No return address, but I recognized Mom's handwriting on the label. Inside was a check for $100,000 and a note in her careful cursive. "We should have given you this for college. We're sorry." I looked at that check for a long time, sitting at my kitchen table with morning light streaming through windows I'd installed myself. $100,000. The exact amount they'd given Veronica without hesitation. The amount they decided I wasn't worth. The money could do a lot. Pay off my remaining student loans, build a proper store on the property, buy equipment I'd been saving for. But taking it would mean accepting their terms, their timeline for reconciliation. It would mean agreeing that money could fix what they'd broken. I tore the check into pieces small enough that they couldn't be taped back together. Put them in an envelope with a single sentence written on a piece of paper. "You can't buy forgiveness." Then I mailed it back to their address. Dr. Singh smiled when I told her about it during our next session. How did that feel? "Expensive," I admitted, "but right. Growth often is," she said. Dad tried one more time about a month after the return check. He showed up at my gate without warning, apparently having decided Veronica's ambush approach might work better for him. I watched him on the security camera, standing there in his weekend khakis and polo shirt, looking older than I remembered. I picked up the intercom. "Leave. I just want 5 minutes, please. You had 26 years. You used them to tell me I wasn't good enough. We're done." "I was wrong," he said, his voice cracking slightly. And part of me, the part that was still his little girl, desperate for approval, wanted to open the gate. But I'd worked too hard to let that part drive anymore. "You were," I said quietly. "And now you get to live with that, just like I had to live with it. Can't we move past this? Can't you forgive us?" "I can forgive you," I said slowly, realizing as I spoke that it was true. "I can forgive you for being flawed parents who played favorites and damaged their daughter. But forgiveness doesn't mean reconciliation. It doesn't mean letting you back into my life to do more damage. It just means I'm not carrying your mistakes anymore." He stood there for a long moment, shoulders sagging. Then he walked back to his car and drove away. I watched until his taillights disappeared down the road. That was 3 months ago. They haven't tried since. Maybe they finally accepted that some bridges, once burned, don't get rebuilt. Maybe they tell their friends I'm ungrateful or difficult. Maybe Veronica still cries about the unfairness of it all during her wine tastings with Marcus in their $100,000 house. I don't know, and I don't care. That's the freedom I've earned. The ability to simply not care what they think of me anymore. My lavender farm just finished its best season yet. Revenue hit 6 figures for the first time, and projections for next year look even better. I'm launching a line of lavender skincare products in partnership with a small cosmetics company. Chris and I are talking about moving in together, maybe building a second small house on the property. I'm teaching a workshop next month on sustainable farming practices. Life looks nothing like what my parents imagined for either of their daughters, and everything like what I needed it to be. Some days I still feel that old ache, wishing I had a family who celebrated my successes and showed up for my life. But mostly I feel grateful for the family I've chosen. Friends who actually care, a therapist who helps me heal, a community that values what I build. The Martinez family lost a daughter the day they called her a failure. They just didn't realize it until she stopped needing their validation enough to prove them wrong. By then, I had already built something they could never touch, a life that belonged entirely to me. Purchased not with their money, but with my own sweat, tears, and stubborn refusal to be who they said I was. Sometimes at sunset, I walk through my lavender fields with the bees humming and the goats trailing behind me, and I feel something I never felt growing up: peace. The bone-deep certainty that I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be, doing exactly what I'm meant to do. My parents gave Veronica $100,000 and called it an investment. They gave me nothing but doubt and criticism and called it motivation. Turns out they were both wrong about what I needed. I needed exactly what they refused to give me: the chance to fail on my own terms, to struggle without them watching with disappointment, to build something without their fingers on the scale. They meant to abandon me, instead they freed me. So when people ask if I'll ever reconcile with my family, I smile and say, probably not. Because the family that matters isn't the one you're born into. It's the one you build around yourself, person by person, choice by choice, boundary by boundary. And mine doesn't have room for people who only valued me once I didn't need them anymore.